This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Abam, welcome everyone. We continue with our series of Shirim Wednesday night, Sefer Vayikra, and tonight, because of the recent Avelos that all of Klal Yisrael is Mesabel al Asreifa Asher Saraf Hashem, with the Petira of the Sar HaTorah Maran, Reb Shmaryahu Yosef Chaim Kanievsky Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. That's what we're going to speak about this evening. The series of shiurim are sponsored by Dr. Zakheim, Umeshpachta, L'ilei Nishmas, Reb Shlomo Eliezer ben Harav Yaakov Zakheim, and L'ilei Nishmas, Dr. Zakheim's mother, Rivka Bas Tuvia Halevi, the Neshama should have an Aliyah, B'Gan Eden Tehei Menuchasam. Tonight's shiur is sponsored anonymously as Chus Refuah Shalema for Shabtai ben Dina, the Refuah Shalema, also sponsored by Yitzi Stern, as Refuah Shalema for Menachem Zev ben Clara, and also sponsored by Yedidi, Rav Moshe Michal Halevi Hafman, the Zecher Nishmas, the Neshamas that were killed in the terrorist attack in Beersheba this week. So, the last couple of days, I can't get out of my head the towering Gadol that we were Zoichet to be in his generation, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. I go to sleep thinking about him, I wake up thinking about him the whole day. Of course, there are many Gedolim that lived in our time, but Reb Chaim Kanievsky was probably the most accessible Gadol in our time, even though it wasn't easy to get in, but most people, at some point in their life, they had the chus to meet Reb Chaim Kanievsky. I mean, I have a number of letters that I wrote to him that he responded. Any letter I ever wrote to him, he responded. So I want to speak a little bit about the ingredients that made up Reb Chaim Kanievsky, how he became who he was, and what we could learn from it. So we're going to call the shiur, Learn the 10 Ingredients of the Greatness of Reb Chaim Kanievsky that will mamash change your life. I might have 11 ingredients, but who's counting? Okay, so we're going to begin, of course, with where Reb Chaim Kanievsky comes from. We know his father was Reb Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky, the Steipler Goin, one of the great Goinim of our century. You know, many people had this chus to see him, to know him. Of course, we have his Svarim, Kilas Yaakov, on all the Masechtas, and the Sefer Chayei Olam. And somebody once came to the Steipler and asked for a bracha for Hatzlacha and Chinuch. What eitzah could you give? They asked the Steipler to be successful in raising children who are righteous, God-fearing. And Reb Chaim, the Steipler said, you want eitzahs, you want tachbulos, you want brachas. There are no brachas, there are no eitzahs, there are no tachbulos. There's only one way. You have to daven. That's the only thing you could do. Said the Steipler, what do you think? You see my son over here, Chaimol. What do you think? You don't think I daven for him? Every single day I daven that Chaimol should grow up to be a Talmid Chacham, a Yer Shamayim, about Midos Tovos. And little Chaimol was already 52 years old at the time, one of the Gedolei Hadar. And the Steipler daily, it didn't matter if Chaim was bar mitzvah, and at 16 he knew Shas with Tosfos, and at 20 is from the Gedolei Hadar, and at 50 is from one of the all-time great Goinim. The Steipler was mispalel, b'demois, shalish, 3 times a day, all day, that Reb Chaim Kanievsky should grow up with Yer Shamayim. And when you have a father like that who is investing and imbuing the child with such tremendous, everybody knows the Koach HaTfilah of the Steipler. The Koach HaTfilah, the Steipler was Oyam V'Noira. I mean, people went to the Steipler and saw all kinds of Yeshuas. And here, the Steipler is saying that at least until Reb Chaim was 52 years old, the Steipler was mispalel for him, b'demoi sholosh, again and again and again and again. So that's how you have Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Can you imagine such a thing? When the all-time Goinei Olam is mispalel for this kid, that's how you have Reb Chaim. So that's ingredient number 1. The tfilos of the Steipler. Don't think that Reb Chaim just came about. decades and decades, and I'm sure the Steipler was mispalel for him even before he was born. One of the most important and responsibilities of a parent is to daven for their children incessantly, all day, every single day. Mishabur identifies many locations just in the tefillah alone. When you say Berchas HaTorah, when you say Ahava Rab or Ahava Soilam, when you say V'seim Libeinu Lahavinu Lahaskel, Mishabur says when you say Leman Lo Nigal Arik V'nei Bahala, the Chaya Adam says when you say in Valatzion, when you say in Moedim, there are many, many occasions. One of the main responsibilities of a parent is to invest tefillos in the children. Here, Steipler is saying, Reb Chaim is one of the Gedolei Ador, he doesn't stop davening for his son. Ingredient number 2. The Steipler wrote on many, many Masechtas. It's not easy to write a sefer, especially Lamdas of Shas. Reb Steipler learned with Reb Chaim Kanievsky when he was a young boy, hours and hours and hours and hours, daily, nightly, Friday night, all day. In the Sefer Minchas Toida, which is the biographical information of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, he brings, actually I skipped one, before Reb Steipler's learning with him. Reb Chaim would say that from the time Reb Chaim was young, before he could even read a Mishnah or learn Gemara, his father taught him Baal Peh, the names of all the Masechtas of Mishnayos, the names of all the Masechtas of Gemara, the names of all the Svarim of Tanakh. And the Reb Chaim would teach his children with like a tune, with a niggin. Bereish, I don't know if he used the country Yossi. Bereishis Nayach Lech Lech. I have a feeling the Steipler didn't necessarily use that niggin. He probably had something from Navardik, I believe. Somehow, I don't know if that one made it to Navardik, but the Steipler would sing to Reb Chaim the names of the Masechtas, the names of the books of Tanakh, in a special niggin, and the names of the Parshios and the Chav Dalet Sifrei Tanakh. In fact, Reb Chaim's sister knew all the names of the Masechtas Baal Peh, all the names of the Mishnayos and books of Tanakh from the niggin that the Tata used to sing. In fact, Chana Steinman, daughter-in-law of the Steipler, sister of Reb Chaim, Reb Chaim's sister. 50 years later, she remembered, you see, the Rebbitzin, I think that might have been the tune. Your brother? Send my best. But not now.
He says it's not on. The Zoom is not on.
It's on. You can hear me there on the Zoom? Yeah.
Looking at Torah at any time.
It's not on Torah anytime.
Look at
RabbiDG.com.
RabbiDG.com.
Okay. The sister of the Steipler, the daughter-in-law of Rav Aaron Leib Steinman, she would say, tell me he has to come to the shir.
You have to come to shir.
Thanks. That the Steipler's Reb Chaim's mother used to cook fish with carrots. The kids liked the fish, they couldn't stand the carrots. So everyone would eat the fish and then there would be these carrots left. But Reb Chaim paskin that you can't throw out the carrots, it's bal tashchas. If Reb Chaim paskins the carrots are bal tashchas, then somebody's got to eat the carrots. So the Steipler paskins was bal tashchas. So the Steipler would play a game. He would sing a song, and whoever was each kid was corresponded to another word of the song. When the song stopped by that kid had to eat the carrots. And that's the way it was. No, you are out. But that wasn't the song. Instead, the Steipler would sing the names of the Masechtas. So whichever kid landed on Uktzin ate the carrots. So the daughter-in-law of Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman, 50 years later, told Reb Chaim, I know all the names of the Masechtas from the song that the Steipler would sing. In fact, story goes that in the yeshiva near Letterman Shul in Beis Yosef, when Reb Chaim was a little boy, just when he was able to talk, when he would see Talmid Chacham, he would come running over to him and say, "Nu, test me on Shas." Reb Chaim couldn't even read a pasuk in Chumash. What do you mean, test me on Shas? Test me on the names of the Masechtas of Shas. And the question is, so why did the Stipler do this? Why did the Stipler teach his kids the names of the Masechtas, the names of the books of Tanakh? And Reb Chaim said to imbue within the children a cheshek for Torah. Because if you know the name of the Masechta and you know the name of the Tanakh, you know the name of the books, you're going to want to know what's inside. So you can imagine from a young age, what did Reb Chaim hear? He didn't hear, the Yankees, the Mets. Stop, he was saved from that. The Giants. He heard the names of the Masechtas of Shas. He heard the names of the books of Tanakh. And he had a father who imbued within him, endowed within him a cheshek to know the Torah. There's a very interesting niggin that the Stipler would sing for Echad Mi Yodeya. And this niggin came all the way from Nevardik. Echad Mi Yodeya, Echad Mi Yodeya, Echad Elokeinu Shema Ba'aretz, Shnei Yodeya, Shnei Luchos Habrish, Shloisha Avos. So there's a Nevardika version. The Nevardika version goes like this. Echad mi yodeya, echad hachoifer bar siach uma'ara babakama dafnun. Shnayim mi yodeya, shnayim oichsen betalas. Gimel mi yodeya, shloisha sha'achlu. Brachas memhei. Arba avois nazikin babakama daf beis. Chamisha tamin chamisha muadim babakama tezvav amad beis. Shisha arayos chamuris me'elu yavamas yud gimel. Shivas Yoimim, Kaidem Yom HaKippurim, the beginning of Yuma. Shmoina Shratzim, Shabbos Kov Zayin. Tisha Chanuyos, Ksubas Tesvav. Asora Yuchsin Alumi Bavel, Kedushin. Echad Asar Yoim Bein Nida Lanida, between Nidos and Zava, 11 days. Shnayim Asar Dodin Hayu Lekiyar. The Kiyar had 12 spigots. Shloisha Asar Kaihanim. That was the Nevardika version, and Reb Chaim was Moisef. Reb Chaim said, why did they stop at 13? Oral Arbasar, Boitkinas Hachames, Tesvav Noshim, Paitros Sarasayim, Shisha Asar Shechalios B'Shabbos, Shiva Asar Yoivlois, Shmoina Asar Dvarim, Tisha Asar Dvarim Nemru Begara. Ad Esrim Amma Adam Yoshev B'Tzel Sukkah. And in the book binding of one of Reb Chaim's Sfarim, he came up with a niggin for 21 until 100 from Shas. So you say, well, okay, it sounds cute. It's a nice game. What's the purpose of this? Why did he do this? So I saw an amazing thing. If you look in Rabbi Kiva Eger in the Gilyon HaShas counts all the times Rashi in Shas says, Ani lo yedea. In Reb Chaim Shas, he writes, and Rabbi Kiva Eger forgot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the question is, Rabbi Kiva Eger was a pretty big bucky. Mustama, he also was a bucky like Reb Chaim. Why didn't Rabbi Kiva Eger list all of them? So Reb Chaim said like this. Why is Rabbi Kiva Eger listing the times Rashi says Eini Yadea? Says the Reb Chaim, it's a kavod for the Torah. It's mechabed the Torah when you have such mastery over it that you could cross-reference and remember and make connections between different things in Torah that are similar, even though there's no practical benefit. It's a certain chashivos you show to the Torah. So Rabbi Kiva Eger, on the spot, this is what popped into his head without trying. Of course, if he would have put an effort, he would have come up with all of them. So Rabbi Chaim says, Rabbi Kiva Eger was mechabed the Torah, what he felt was appropriate lefi ha'es, and my turn now to be mechabed the Torah is to mention those things that, of course, Rabbi Kiva Eger knew that he wasn't ma'ametz moichai to remember at the time. But this is the kind of yediyah that Reb Chaim had, and I think it's important to realize the influence that a parent has. That Reb Chaim's father, Reb Chaim Kanievsky was a person. He was a gadol, so he was a person, and he had a father who was a person. And this Adam Gadol, the Stipler, imbued within Reb Chaim a cheshek noira to know the Torah. Number 3, and that's what I was mentioning before, the amount of time the Stipler invested teaching Reb Chaim personally, one-on-one. In the Sefer Minchas Toida, he brings that the Stipler learned with Reb Chaim. Friday night, he learned Perek Shah of Psachim. And when the Stipler was done with Reb Chaim at age 12, Reb Chaim was able to be mefalpel in Psachim with any Gadol b'Yisrael, including the Chazon Ish. More than that, the Stipler learned with Reb Chaim by his bar mitzvah, all the difficult Masechtas in Shas. Erevin, Zvachim, Menachos, Chulin. And then the stipler told him, the rest you should learn on your own. Says Reb Chaim, the first Masechta I learned with my father, I know the best. The next Masechta I learned at 13, I know a little less. The Masechta I learned at 14, a little bit less. And the last Masechta my father learned with me, Baba Basra, I know the least. Why? Girsa de Yankusa. The younger you learn something, the deeper the impact. Says Reb Chaim, till today, I have the greatest difficulty with Masechta Baba Basra. And Reb Chaim brought a raya from the Gemara in Shabbos Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. The Gemara said, the rabbis taught something before Abaye in the name of Yirmiyah. Abaye didn't accept it. When Rabin came, the Rabbanon said before Abaye in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and Abaye accepted it. And he said, if I would have been zoicha to hear it from Rabin 5 minutes earlier, I would have been better off. Why? Because it would have been Girsa de Yankusa. Now I learned it 5 minutes later, it's not Girsa de Yankusa anymore. So the earlier you learn the shir, that's why it's better to be at the shir than to hear the recording 9:15, because 9:15 is not Girsa de Yankusa anymore. 8:30 already, you hear it live, you'll remember it much better. I had this chus, I was in Cleveland recently, and I visited the Rosh Yeshiva of Telz, Rav Avram David Goldberg, and he gave me a kunshvus he wrote on chinuch. And he brings, in number 5, that the Brisker Rav said about himself, that he gave up 10 years of his life teaching and writing to learn with his children. He said, imagine what the Brisker Rav could have wrote, imagine what he could have taught, but look at the payros from it. A good chunk of Torah in the world today is through the influence of the Brisker Rav, through his children. Many of the Rosh Yeshivas today are Talmidim of the Brisker Rav's children. So that's the Yesod. Don't think Reb Chaim came from a father who invested within him tremendous koichos. Number 4. Now there's one I don't have on my official list, because I don't have any good Mar Mekayimos on it. But I have a good story. So it will be on the number 11. Maybe this is the most important one. I just, I don't like saying just stories. It has to be documented in a sefer. But this story left an impression on me. And I think, you know what? I'm going to say it after number 4. Who was Reb Chaim Kanievsky's roommate? L'chaira, whoever his roommate was probably had a big influence on him. So, the Chazon Ish lived in a room. At some point in time, the stipler, his wife, and Reb Chaim had to move in with the Chazon Ish. So what the Chazon Ish did was he put up a thing in the middle of the room, and now it was a 2-family house. So Reb Chaim slept in the same room as the Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish had a tremendous hashba on Reb Chaim. Chazon Ish never had children, but Reb Chaim in a way was like heir of the Chazon Ish. One time Reb Chaim came in, and the Chazon Ish, his derech was he woke up every morning at 3 a.m. Even if he went to sleep at 12 or 1 a.m., he woke up every morning at 3 a.m. So you can imagine, during the day, it gets a little rough when you wake up at 3 a.m. every day. And the Chazon Ish was lying down, and Reb Chaim hears the Chazon Ish drag himself out of bed. He said, Atzlan, you lazy, get out of bed. How do you lie down in the middle of the day? Imagine you're a little kid, and your roommate, Chazon Ish, the accountability that the Chazon Ish held himself, that's how Reb Chaim grew up. Reb Chaim would say over, Chazon Ish did not know what he looked like. Chazon Ish did not, if you showed the Chazon Ish a picture of himself, he did not know it was him. Chazon Ish never looked at a mirror in his life. And moreover, Reb Chaim would say over that on Yom Noram, Chazon Ish's mother came to live with Chazon Ish also. And on Yom Noram, Chazon Ish would visit his mother daily, including Yom Noram, and tell stories to his mother. Reb Chaim is one. What in the world? Chazon Ish is telling Maisalach of what happened in Kosovo to his mother, and Chaim saw the Mesiras Nefesh the Chazon Ish had for Kibbud Eim. His mother enjoyed hearing stories, and the Chazon Ish would take off 30 minutes a day to schmooze with his mother. And he wasn't talking in, Hilchos Roem or Hilchos Mikvos. He was stam shooting the breeze with his mother. And one time, Chazon Ish was caught up in something, and his mother told her daughter, "Where is Avram Yeshaya?" So Chazon Ish's sister went running to Chazon Ish, "Everything okay?" Chazon Ish said, "Oh, I forgot to visit." And he ran to his mother. The nusach of the story was, not even an Olympic medalist could have keep up with the Chazon Ish when he ran. Actually, it doesn't say that, but it says, "B'mehirus gedoyla shleihoya shayich lahasigai v'zel l'shaynai." That was a Chazon Ish. So you grow up with. Now I'm going to tell you a gevaldik amaisa. Don't tell anybody, because this is one of those, not politically correct stories that I love. So the story goes like this. Chazon Ish was a big shadchan. And there was one bacher. Chazon Ish tells Reb Chaim, "Reb Chaim, I want you to go to Bacher Ploini, and I want you to tell Bacher Ploini, I want you to suggest the following shidduch." Now, the Bacher Ploini was like a spitz bacher. He was like the best bacher in Panovich. And the shidduch was mamish a lousy shidduch. This girl had, it's a bad shidduch for this guy. And Reb Chaim, Chazon Ish says, it's like, it's from Halach L'Moshe Misinai. So Reb Chaim went to the bacher. And Chazon Ish said, but one thing, you cannot, I take a shvuas ha'ala, you can't tell the boy whose suggestion this was. So Chaim's wondering, the boy would never go out with this girl. Maybe if he hears the Chazon Ish suggested, he would. But now I'm not going to tell him who suggested it. So Chaim goes to the boy. The boy says, "What? That's the suggestion?" But Reb Chaim's not going to even be maharach the Chazon Ish. That day, Reb Chaim heard Mazel Tov. The boy's engaged to a different girl. And who's the shadchan? Chazon Ish. So Chaim said, what in the world is going on? The Chazon Ish was the shadchan of this boy to a different girl, so why would he tell me to suggest to the boy this bad girl? So Chazon Ish said, this boy is a spitz bacher, but he's a shtickle bar gaiva. He was getting cold feet because he thought maybe he would find better. So I needed to psychologically convince him to go out to marry the better girl, because look what people think of him. They suggest mamish, D- quality. And there's a whole tshuva whether it's halachically permitted to trick somebody to use such a psychological ploy. Okay, this is not part of the shir. If you don't like the story, if you can't deal with the story, if it doesn't meet your standards, just they have something called MP4, a video splitter. Just splice it out. This is the story. It's a documented story. Reb Chaim knew the Hanhagos of the Chazon Ish better than anybody. In fact, the Stipler asked Reb Chaim to write Hanhagos Chazon Ish, and Reb Chaim said, "I can't do it. I'm afraid I'm going to get to Shamayim, and forget what they're going to ask me. What's the Chazon Ish going to say? He's going to ask me, why'd you write this? Why'd you write like that? Can't do it." So Reb Chaim grew up with an uncle like the Chazon Ish. I mean, you think about, we're zoicha to have someone of this caliber, someone who he lived with Chazon Ish. He's a chavrusa, the Stipler. Here's an ingredient. I didn't put it on the list. I don't have Mar Mekoymos, but the story is priceless. So Reb Chaim has two chavrusas, Reb Tzvi Yabrov and Reb Yitzchak Zilberstein. They learn with him every Friday morning, and Reb Chaim was making a siyum on many mesechtas. So the Rebbitzin came in with cake and coffee, like she did every Friday. She would bring in cake and coffee, and she brought Reb Chaim his coffee in a huge glass, special glass. Usually Reb Chaim drinks, 6 ounces. This glass had 15 ounces. And then Zuck the Rebbitzin in front of Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein and the others, "Chaim, the reason I brought in such a large glass is because you're making a siyum. I'm so proud of you, Chaim." Says the Rebbitzin. Reb Chaim smiled. Reb Chaim was beaming. The Rebbitzin said to the chavrusas after Reb Chaim left that the reason she served the glass of coffee and praised him is because everyone has to hear complimentary words, and the main achrayus of a wife is to praise her husband. Since it's my chiyuv to praise Reb Chaim, I do it in private. But sometimes I do it publicly. The words a wife uses to praise her husband are the most important words she will ever say. It's Beferish and Art Scroll. Page 139, Chaim Kanievsky. I don't have a Maramakim, so it's not, to be in the Aseres HaDibros, you have to be Maramakim. But it's still, to be in the Shir, Reb Chaim's wife was the daughter of Rabbi Yashiv. I mean, she was Isha Chashuva Mefayara in her own right. Tzadekes and Ein Bi Yisrael. And there's no question that Reb Chaim's Gadlus was Ish v'Isha Shalom Beineim Shechina Beineim. Ingredient number 5, Reb Chaim was Mekayim the following inyan Ad Lahafli Kibud Avayim. Reb Chaim said that anytime they had a child, they would never name the child. He would always ask his parents, what should he name the child? Kibud Avayim. Whenever he had a sefer, he would never name the sefer. He would ask his parents, what should he name the sefer? Reb Chaim visited his mother every single day without fail. And then when his mother passed away, he figured, the Stipler doesn't need a visit. And then when the Stipler said, what do you mean? The Stipler called Reb Chaim, just because mom's not around. I also enjoy your visit. So then Reb Chaim would visit his father every single day. And by the way, when the Stipler passed away, Reb Chaim then visited his sister, who was an almana, every single day. He didn't let a day go by without visiting his sister. So we think, these people, they didn't waste a second. They didn't have time for these things. No. Nobody spent more time with their parents than Reb Chaim Kanievsky. I heard from reliable sources that the Kloisenberger Rebbe, current one, in either Bar Park or Williamsburg, no, the Kloisenberger Rebbe in Netanya, his mother was alive. The Kloisenberger Rebbe's wife was nifter pretty recently. He would call his mother every night for 60 minutes. Every single day. Anyway, one time, the story goes, that they told the Stipler, Chaim, his back is hurting him. So Stipler came running to Reb Chaim Kanievsky. He figured it's his son Reb Chaim. He said, your back hurts? Lie down. Stipler says lie down, so Reb Chaim, he lies down, right? Like Moshe Rabbeinu was saying to lie down. And the Stipler starts massaging Reb Chaim's back. He poured oil on it. He gave him like a whole, and he said, okay, lie here till the morning. So it's like Exer Sakosov. The Stipler said, lie. Reb Chaim didn't move. He didn't move. A few hours later, they told the Stipler, no, not your son Chaim, your grandson, a different one. The Stipler said, oy vey, probably I'm going to come back in the morning and Reb Chaim's still going to be there. Yes, Reb Chaim was there in the morning. The Stipler said, lie down and don't move. The Stipler Reb Chaim didn't move until the Stipler gave him a heter to move. That was the Kibbud Av. Taima Dekra. By the way, I never knew this. It's unbelievable. I have Taima Dekra. Printed in front of it is Bryce of the Melechas HaMishkan, like random, like what Shaykhis is the Bryce of the Melechas HaMishkan. Because Reb Chaim said, they told the Or Sameach, before he wrote Meshech Chachma, he wrote Or Sameach on the Rambam. Now, Meshech Chachma is much more learned than the Or Sameach. But the Rameir Simcha was afraid if he writes on Chumash, people is going to think he's a darshan. So first he wrote on Lamdus, and then he wrote on Chumash. So Reb Chaim followed that pattern. Before he wrote Taima Dekra, he wrote Bryce of the Melechas HaMishkan. Now, before he published it, he showed his father, and his father took out 15 pieces. Reb Chaim didn't ask any questions. The Tata said, don't publish 15 pieces. He didn't publish them. 20 years later, he reprinted Taima Dekra. He put in many new pieces, including the 15 the Stipler took out. He showed it to his father. His father took out the exact same 15 pieces. And it's unbelievable. Now this is Reb Chaim in Taima Dekra has more pieces on Megillas Esther than any other subject. Why? Because technically you're not allowed to do Malach on Purim. So you can't write Svarim on Purim. So, but you could write a Megillas Esther. So every Purim, Reb Chaim dedicated to Megillas Esther. So they asked Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim has a sefer, a perush, on, it's called Kiryas Melech, on the Rambam's Hakdama to Mishnayos. If you look here, I have it in my edition, it says, Siyamti Leil Purim. So you see, you write on Purim, we got you, we caught you. You know, it's one thing, if somebody would see you, you could say, I'm writing on Purim, but he finished the perush on the Rambam on the night of Purim. He said, yeah, because I was writing it as Shalach Manas to give to my father. So the Perush, Kiryas Melech, of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, appears on the Rambam's Hakdama. Reb Chaim wrote it as Mishlach Manos to his father, the Stipler, and he gave it to him in the morning. Reb Chaim, when Bar Mitzvah boys would come to Reb Chaim, and Reb Chaim would say, be makabel upon yourself one mitzvah to be mechazek in. So they would say, which mitzvah? Reb Chaim would always say, kibbut avim. And he brought a raya from Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says one should always be mechazek in a specific mitzvah, never to be over it. The Lashon Yerushalmi is in Kedushin Chav Beis, kegoin kibbut avim. And this story is unbelievable. They asked the Chazon Ish once went into Yeshiva to Faher the Bachram. They said, so there's one guy, you always have that guy, you know, who has like a random, not in this shir, but in other shirim, there's always the guy, you're giving a shir on what, Erevin? Rabbi, I was just wondering about, the halachas of gefilte fish, the guy who has the random question guy. So there's the random question guy in the Chabad Chazon Ish, and the Chazon Ish is asking questions, and this kid, so the Rebbe was like motioning to the kid, like, you don't ask the Chazon Ish random questions. At the end of the Faher, the boy says, Chazon Ish, what did you do that you became the Chazon Ish? What mitzvah did you do? Like everybody wants to bury themselves. And Chazon Ish thought, and he said, kibbut avim. Kibbut avim. Okay, ingredient number 6. Reb Chaim was very circumspect in the way he spoke. He didn't talk. It's unbelievable. I mean, there wasn't a levaya like this in the history of the Jewish people. Maybe Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. Say, he must have been a big speaker. He must have been an inspirational speaker. How many times in his life, how many times did he speak publicly? Never. How many times did anybody ever hear Reb Chaim speak for 1 minute consecutively? I don't know if anybody did. Can you imagine? He gave a shir once a year for a few minutes on Yerushalmi for the Stipler's yard site. And he had the ahava of all of Klal Yisrael. That itself is unbelievable. He didn't speak, and he commanded one of the biggest crowds in the history of the Jewish people. Reb Chaim would say over, they heard from his Rebbe that a person's words are given to him in a specific amount, and you don't want to deplete them. And I saw, everybody knows Reb Chaim had this, when you would go to Reb Chaim, the bracha you got, of course, was boha, buha. There's even a song about it. And the question, why did Reb Chaim say? Why couldn't he say bracha v'hatzlacha? So look, there's no question Reb Chaim had a sense of humor. If anybody Reb Chaim had. But Reb Chaim was asked, Reb Chaim said, a person has a certain allotment of words, and then if you could say, instead of bracha v'hatzlacha, buha, and at the same time make somebody smile, then you could save yourself a word. Reb Chaim, until he got married, was in Tainas Dibur from Rosh Chodesh Elul until Yom Kippur every year. 40 days. Number 7, and this might be the ingredient which is the most compelling and powerful in terms of what created Reb Chaim and what we could learn from, is the chayvos of Reb Chaim. I have a sefer at home. I bought it many years ago. I don't think I looked at it too much. The name of it is HaChayvos. Everybody knows Reb Chaim had a pile of svarim. obligatory learnings that he did every day. Until Reb Chaim did it, you couldn't talk to him. It's like chas v'shalom, somebody had on them financial debt and they're just completely caught up in it and immersed in it and fartrach and completely engrossed in it, and they can't talk to anybody until they somehow get it off their back. Reb Chaim had choyvos in learning. Everybody knows every Erev Pesach he made a siyum on Kol HaTorah Kula. So I bought the Sefer Choyvos. It's all about Reb Chaim's choyvos. Here they are. Here are the choyvos of Reb Chaim. He woke up at midnight. He said Tikkun Chatzos. Then he learned Zohar privately. People didn't see it. Then he said Tehillim. He said 1 chapter a day. Then when he got up to Rosh Chodesh Elul, 10 a day. And Asar Simei Tshuva, the whole Tehillim daily. Then he learned a parak of Nach a day. And then he learned 3 pages of Mishnah Berurah a day. By the way, if anybody wants to join us, we're launching soon, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the historic Shoyneh Halachos program, a blot of Mishnah Berurah week. Unbelievable. And if on Shabbos you could chazer with the Shoyneh Halachos of Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Reb Chaim learned 3 pages of Mishnah Berurah a day, a few pages of Rambam, 5 pages of Shulchan Aruch, 8 blot Gemara, all the Yushalmi on that Gemara, all the Tosefta on that Gemara. See, when was he Maver Sedra? Friday after Mincha he went to the mikvah, and he learned the whole parsha, Shnai Mikra, Echa Targum, with Rashi, Shemois with the Mechilta, Vayikra with Taras Kainim, Bamidbar Dvarim Sifra Sifri. And his Rebbetzin also had chayvos. She had obligatory learning. She learned every day Tehillim, Igaras Ramban, Parak Shira, 2 halachas Lashon Hara, and then she upped it to 4 as a chutz for people to have children and Archas Tzadikim. And the Rebbetzin would tell Reb Chaim, Chaimol, I could help you with everything in this world except for your chayvos. Actually, when Reb Chaim married off his son, who's Rosh Hashiva in Kiryas Melech, Reb Chaim told the Mechutin, I can't go to Sheva Brachas. Mechutin said, why? Reb Chaim said, I have chayvos. Mechutin said, what could I do to help you? Reb Chaim said, not that kind of chayvos. Chaim didn't go. This pressure, so to speak, of obligatory learning that Reb Chaim put on himself was like very unique among Gedolei Yisrael. But literally, the whole Sefer is about that Reb Chaim's mood and his well-being was completely dependent on where he was holding in the chayvos. In other words, in the beginning of the day, feeling the onus of the chayvos, he wasn't feeling well. When he executed it, he felt, you could tell on the Reb Chaim's face where he was holding in his chayvos. Now, most people are not going to be able to learn 8 blot a day and do all of these chayvos of Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Most people are not going to be learning 3 pages of Mishnah Berurah a day. He also learned a lot of Mishnayos outside of this chayvos. But most people could learn 2 psukim of Nevi'im every day. Most people could learn a page of Mishnah Berurah a week. Most people could learn a sif of Shulchan Aruch every day, 5 lines of Gemara a day. So why can't we do it? Why not? If we would also have a certain system of obligatory learning, so then that obligation would give us the energy and the ability to probably do more than we would do otherwise. And ingredient number 8 is the one which is Oyam V'Naira. This is the one which is most meaningful to me. They asked Reb Chaim, no, when did you start learning these chayvos? Reb Chaim said, from age 16, once I finished Shas. By the way, they asked Reb Chaim, should we learn 8 blot a day? Reb Chaim said, no, because you don't know it. And if you don't know it, then you're just going to be reading words. You can only do it if you actually know it and it's review. So they asked Reb Chaim, when did you start? Says Reb Chaim, I started at 16. And I couldn't do it. At 8, I couldn't do it. It was too much. So I tried again at 17. And I couldn't do it. And then I tried at 18, and I was able to do it. Unbelievable! Reb Chaim Kanievsky, he couldn't do it in the beginning. It was too hard for him. And imagine Reb Chaim would have thrown in the towel. Imagine Reb Chaim would have said, I can't do it. So forget it. Then we wouldn't have Reb Chaim Kanievsky. But he didn't give up. He tried again. And it didn't go. And he tried a third time. So we see, whenever you try something, at least you tried. And try again. And if it didn't work the third time, you could try a fourth time. Number 9, I'm going to skip the order. I'm going to go to 10 on my list first. Number 9. Reb Chaim was punctilious and so careful about every millet. Like he wouldn't say an extra word because Hatzlacha would take extra time. Reb Chaim kept the shas in the car that took him to Bris Milah, so he'd be able to continue to learn in the car. When Reb Chaim would have to go for a walk, he had Gemaras with him, so that when he stopped on the bench, he could continue. Reb Chaim would say, most people say in this world, I don't have time. Reb Chaim said, there's no such thing as not having time. When a person says, I don't have time, they mean to say, I don't want. I don't want to. I don't have time, Reb Chaim says, means I don't want to. Because if you want to, you'll make the time. You'll find the time. Reb Chaim would say, a masmid has time for everything. All you need is ratzain. When people say they don't have the time, they mean they don't want to. They don't really want to do it. And I was very taken by this expression because I saw the exact same words in the writing of the Chidah. Chidah talks about how on Shabbos, people are busy the whole week, and at least on Shabbos Kodesh, should spend the day learning, not to spend the whole day strolling around, eating, drinking, sleeping. Shabbos was given Leininu Shabbos as Elamai Torah. Says the Chidah, so, how do you have time for everything? I need to rest, I need to eat, I need to be Maver Sedra, I need to review Gemara. How do I have time for everything? The Chidah says, actually, a friend of mine once wrote a book about the Chidah, Reb Zev Peretsky. I remember he starts off the book with this quote from the Chidah. Mi she'enoi ma'abed hazman yesh eis lakol. Someone who doesn't waste time, there's time for everything. I'll talk about the caliber. There's a question on Yom Tif. Are you allowed to take a shower on Yom Tif? Technically, according to the Shulchan Aruch, you can't. Because taking a shower is not a universal need. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. But the question now is, okay, maybe back in the day, people showered once a week. Nowadays, in America, the norm in society is people bathe or shower every day. So they brought it to Rabbi Yashiv. Halachically you can't shower on Yom Tov because it's not a universal need, but now it's legitimately a universal need. And Rabbi Yashiv looked at Reb Chaim and he said, really? There are people, listen to what he said, there are people who have enough time to shower every day? Not that people need, whether people need it or not. I'm not talking about the halacha. There might be basis where Moshe has a tshuva. Just the attitude. There are people who have 10 minutes extra every day to bathe. Really? Huh? Well, you can't imagine such a thing. That people have 10 extra minutes in their schedule to actually go into a beis hakisei and change and go into the shower and dry their. Who has time every single day? Well, what people are leidigers, they don't go to work? This is the caliber of people we're doing. This is Reb Chaim's father-in-law. Chaim didn't waste a moment. He was not involved in politics. Chaim would say over, this is a Gavaldik Gavark, by the Chet HaEgal, Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from Har Sinai, and the pasuk oddly says, "Umisharasai Yehoshua benun, umisharasai Yehoshua nar la yamish mitaycha eihel." Moshe comes down, and the Torah, as a non sequitur, seemingly, it says, "And where was Yeshua? He was in the tent." Why is the Torah saying here? Moshe is coming down from Har Sinai. The Jews are making the Egel, and the Torah says, by the way, random factoid over here, and Joshua was in the tent. Why is the Torah telling that? Because you might think, I understand, the Rebbe's upstairs, and the people are rebelling. Yeshua should have been made a hafgana. He should have been walking around with a sign, protesting, throwing spray paint. Now from here we see that the tafkid of a Talmid Chacham, doesn't matter what anyone's doing, is not to get involved in protests and hafganot and politics. That's what the Torah says. And where was Yeshua? How do you know he was Roy to be the leader of the next generation? He didn't get involved in protesting. He was where he was supposed to be. He was not Lo Yomesh Mitoich Ha'ayal. Says Reb Chaim, people who want to use their time wisely, properly, Reb Chaim would say Talmidei Chacham have an extra havtacha, that they don't waste time, so that when their head hits the pillow, they fall asleep right away. Why? Because if they didn't fall asleep right away, they would be wasting time. It would be bittul zman. By the way, I saw that Rabbi Moshe said the same thing. He had a special bracha. The moment his head hit the pillow, he was able to fall asleep. So one of the greatness, part of the greatness of Chaim is he gave a cheshbon for every single moment. But over and beyond that, the last and 10th ingredient was someone who was so oiske cheshbon in his time, who was so calculated, who wouldn't waste a millisecond. There was never anyone like him who was mafker himself to the Jewish people, that his house was a Rishus HaRabim, that every umlal, v'nitzrach, and meshugana, including all of us who probably bothered Reb Chaim with ridiculous questions, had access anytime. And Reb Chaim, despite the fact he wouldn't waste a millisecond, he made his home available to the Jewish people in an unprecedented way, where a good chunk of the day people were in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And Reb Chaim would say, people think I just answer off the cuff. Yeah, no, maybe, yeah, no, maybe. Reb Chaim would say, do you know how much richuz machshava, you know how focused I am on every person's question to give the exact answer, that I try to understand what they're asking? That Reb Chaim said he put in incredible amelos to understand the person's question and to give the most appropriate answer. Reb Chaim once told his family that this week I answered at least 80 letters every day. I have many letters from Reb Chaim. None of the questions were like earth-shattering. You asked the question so you could be zoicha to get an answer from Reb Chaim. So Reb Chaim said he made no headway in his svarim this week. So they said, so don't answer so many letters and, make some headway in your svarim. Reb Chaim would say, I'm not a Magid Shir, I'm not a Rosh Hashiva. Everyone has to be a Marbitz Torah. This is my Harbatzas Torah. Who knows what my zechus for life is? It's a chesed, it makes people happy. On Purim, Reb Chaim would sit there for hours and hours and hours, and thousands of people would stream by. So just close the door and, No, Reb Chaim was so oiske cheshbon with every millisecond, but he was mafker himself at the same time for the Jewish people. So again, who are we to know exactly all the godless of Reb Chaim? Certainly there are many, many ingredients, and whatever we're saying is efes, katseu, sira, v'chulai, loisira. We're just scratching a small dimension, kafi, our very limited understanding of this towering Gadol B'Yisrael. We spoke about the great tefillos that his father Stipler invested in him. We spoke about the cheshek HaTorah that the Stipler invested in him. We spoke about how many hours the Stipler learned with him, the influence of his uncle, the Chazon Ish, the great Kibbut Avaim of Reb Chaim, that the Chazon Ish said that Chazon Ish himself was zoicha to godless through his mitzvah of Kibbut Avaim. How careful Reb Chaim was with every single word. All the various obligatory Siddharim Reb Chaim placed upon himself. And the fact that it wasn't easy at first, and it didn't work at first, and ultimately he was able to persevere. And despite how careful he was with every moment of life, how he was mafker himself and gave himself over to Klal Yisrael. So we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we were zoicha in our generation, be'ikvasa de Mashiach. We always say, Ein lanu eish, v'loi urim v'tumim, v'loi shchina, v'loi ruach HaKodesh, v'loi nevuah, v'loi aroin v'shulchan u'mizbeach. But we had Reb Chaim Kanievsky. And what do we do now? So, Yehi Zichrei Baruch, and Zechusa Yagen Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. Amen.
You've You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.